what we wanted to discuss is three distinct things. But before that, maybe I'll very quickly share about the work that we do at Ashoka and Law for All Initiative. Ashoka was established in the 1980s to catalyze the work that the social entrepreneurs around the world have been doing. In the last 40-45 years, we have elected more than 3,800 fellows in 94 countries, including more than 500 in India. And the Law for All initiative works primarily with the social entrepreneurs that are furthering access to justice through their work. And Nikita, Osama, and Smita, they are all Ashoka fellows. Osama is a senior Ashoka fellow. And for this conversation today, we thought we wanted to discuss about the use of digital tools in the work of social entrepreneurs that are working towards furthering access to justice. And the three areas that I thought might be more relevant for this discussion. One is what are the different strategies that community leaders and social entrepreneurs use that make primarily use of digital tools. The second is what are the strategies that community leaders and social entrepreneurs use when their digital technology fails, it doesn't work for some reason, maybe it's lack of access, maybe because of other issues. And the third is digital tools are used by actors that are other than communities. It could be state, it could be civil society actors, but any actor that is not the community itself. And the digital tools that are used that don't necessarily benefit the community, but put the community in any kind of danger. So I think all those, in all those cases, we see different strategies that are used, different social innovations that are created, and we really want to focus on the social innovations by community leaders and organizations that are working closely with communities. Sometimes organizations are created by communities, so they have members from the communities themselves, and sometimes there are allies and external actors, external individuals which are from outside the community. So I think we see all of these things. So let's start probably with Osama, your work as it's spanning across the country, and for the last 20 years, DF has been working together with many communities. So maybe share a little bit about the strategies that either use digital technology, digital tools for furthering access to justice.
Yeah.
Osama, over to you.
Okay, so it's very interesting because Subhashish, you were not there in the previous session, and those of you were there, yes. And all of it. It's looking like an extension of the previous discussion that we were talking. We were discussing about the book that we just released with the chapter discussing the conversation about digital data justice and all that. Rather than talking more as a fellow, I would like to take the conversation forward, and I'm just thinking that since Law for All as a division in Ashoka and the entire area in Ashoka where we are, several of them we are there already in this area, who directly work for justice, who indirectly work for justice. People like us who are more on the ground, at a larger scale, where we are, we don't even know that we are working for justice, but actually that is what we are working for, because most of the people who are not getting their entitlements, most of the people who are not getting daily requirement is subject to harassment, subject to processes, subject to gatekeeping, subject to authenticating, is actually injustice. I mean, what is my right is actually beyond several milestones, several checkposts, several barriers, several speed breakers and all that is actually a harassment. If I want 5 kg of ration and spending 5 days in getting them, or need so many papers to get them, it is actually injustice. And from that perspective, what we have not done, which we think that we should do, and I'm proposing while I'm discussing this, is that is there a possibility that under Law for All at Ashoka and all of us with the fellows get together and we try to do the do's and don'ts of reaching the justices, and what are the story. For example, we, Government of India, corporates and everybody says that let's say photocopy is not available in villages, let's say, and it is necessary, right? But and because of that people have to travel so much. But we do not say that a photocopy costs to a poor person 250 rupees and we pay 1 rupee. Okay, we do not say that getting a ration costs more than the cost of ration, right? We do not say that getting your school education even free of cost actually costs so much, and it has so many barriers and all that. We take it in a positive inclusion process. We say, okay, it requires 5 identity card, we have only 4. I am going 2 days for last 2 days I'm going the 5th identity card, so to get it. And it is all very normal. If you go to a village and you say that your roads are not working, most of the people will say it's coming up, in next 3 months it will be up. And if you ask more questions, they will say for the last 5 years. But they are very hopefully saying that it will be ready in the next 3 months. We are going to have a highway and we will have all this. So it's a very, I would say it's a very patient way of explaining your torture. It's a very hopeful way of explaining your torture and your injustices. So it is not even treated as injustice. If it is not even seen as injustice. One more example, big example that I would say is that we have started making things digital as a necessity. For example, you have to upload your photograph or something to get something. Like Narega requires you to upload your photograph and your attendance online to get you the wages. Now this is a digital. Earlier also they used to mark attendance, but it was physical. Wherever you are, they will mark on the register or whatever, or put a biometric authentication or something. But now you have to upload. That means you need so many things and all that. Now all this costs a lot, and there is no public access point also to do all this. So how do we actually documentize in such a way that we sound that how costly it is to access to entitlement, how costly it is, or how horrendous it is, or how torturous it is to wait. I mean, for example, in the village, if somebody is not having internet connection, not having computers, not having mobile, I mean, and you say do your classwork and homework online, and then you publish in newspaper this girl in a very appreciative manner that this girl in Kerala goes every day to the top of the hill and submits her classwork, and wow, our people are so resilient and so brave and this and that. I mean, she is clearly saying that what was supposed to be available at home, for which I have to walk 15 kilometers or 20 kilometers to submit my classwork or homework, is a torture. It's not an appreciation. But basically trying to say is that while we are approach, how do we approach anything that is happening in our society and community into the category of injustice and document it in such a way and convert it into economic value. For example, you must be seeing that internet shutdown earlier was a normal news, but now people like us, we have started talking about the economic value of the internet shutdown, emotional value of internet shutdown, or how much are we losing out on economy if it is shut down or something like that. So that way your impact will be much higher, our impact will be much higher if we change the conversation in such a way that we talk about injustices in an economic sense, in an emotional sense, in a value sense, and in a manner that it hits hard to the people who are actually subjecting us to injustices.
Thanks so much, Osama. That was really useful, particularly centering the question around how difficult it is for people to access justice, and you rightly pointed out that it sometimes is not even considered as access because it is very normalized. The pain is very normalized. I think that's really important. And I think that's very pertinent into your work as well, Nikita.
Yeah.
As you're working with many communities, particularly the denotified communities in NP, and I think it also is very useful if you could also provide a little bit of background about your work and how digital tools are used in general, and if they're used at all as catalyst, or if they become a hindrance, and when they become a hindrance, what are the other digital tools that might be used to mitigate such risks, if that exists in your context, because you're also working with communities that live in cities, but there are also communities that live far away from cities without, say, internet connectivity or without any phone connectivity to begin with. So I think, so we're looking at a really large spectrum in terms of access. If you could elaborate a little bit on that.
So I want to sort of push further from that conversation around access to justice to basically speak about how there are communities who are not within anybody's imagination of the framework of justice, right? For whom sort of all tenets of what is considered to be justice is turned on top of its head. So I mean, I was also saying this in the earlier session, like these are communities, scores of communities deemed as criminals by birth, right? So there is a presumption of guilt, there is no presumption of innocence. As they say in this, that you presume somebody is innocent until it's proven that they're guilty. There is a sort of irreversible presumption of guilt that already exists, right? So there is no like sort of process of tariq pe tariq or anything, because you are very fundamentally, your existence is seen to be as lying outside of that framework, and this is the kind of framework that scores of communities who earlier were deemed as whether criminal tribes or thuggees, and now as within this really nebulous category of habitual offenders that we understand in different ways are existing, and it's a category that's only expanding. Acquiring different forms now, particularly in the last decade, has acquired a very sort of prominent sort of religious framing, which is through the othering of Muslims, but has largely included oppressed caste communities, right? So I think for us, what we are seeing now with the advent of digital technology, or the sort of madness and this kind of never-ending exercise to accumulate data, for us it's part of this ongoing process of historical injustice that we're now seeing being digitally replicated, right? And I think for us and for communities that we work with, so many of us who are also part of these communities, the goal is to basically think about how do you now turn this exercise on its head. So at CPA, when we began doing work on policing, in the development space, there is the first sort of question that anybody asks you is, which is the community that you work with, right? So name your community. So the community that we work with or in so many ways work against is the police. A great place to be saying this at. We work on questions of, speaking about how this is an institution, and the way that I'm trained as a lawyer and a researcher. I don't work directly on questions of technology, but in many ways still engage with it as does everybody else. But I do it through the question of casteist policing, right? So as you would say, we speak about the framework, we speak about the design of policing, and we say that it was meant to be a discriminatory framework that is now being put within a sort of digital box, right? And so we're seeing this kind of use of AI, use of facial recognition, using data to identify and mark criminal hotspots. We're saying that the police has always done this. This is not new. This is not news for them, right? Like they know agar chori hua hai, there is a Muslim basti in your jurisdiction, you are going to go there. So there is no element of prediction. It's also just now we've tried to make it seem more sophisticated by saying there is data that has been collected, and now there is technology that is going to tell us that this is the place where crime is going to happen. When if you look at that police station's records historically, that's the only place where they've made arrests and nowhere else, right? So what we are doing is we are pushing back against that and say, well, look, you've collected data on us. Now we are going to collect data on you and try to make meaning of what does this data tell us about the institution of policing. So what is the crux of what we are doing is using technology to sort of cull out data that the police generates on a day-to-day basis, which is in terms of FIRs that they file against people, the arrests that they make, and then mining that data and disaggregating it to understand who they are arresting, right? So naming who they are arresting and what they are arresting them for and how are they doing it. So there is this sort of really common perception, which has obviously been bolstered by pop culture, which is to say, there's this really larger than life kind of police character going after the big bad guys. When in reality, when we look at this disaggregated data, it tells us that it's the police is actually arresting two people who are playing cards on the road, in their mohalla. Or like somebody during the lockdown, somebody who stepped out to buy vegetables, or somebody who was selling vegetables, which was an essential service. So this idea, and of course these are all people who, they were not arresting people at the South Delhi Diwali card parties, right? They were arresting people from marginalized communities who are gambling for leisure. So this idea of how so much of policing is basically very tied to the criminalization of certain forms of being. It's just that there are certain people who have to exist for the police to say that this is the wrong way to exist, and therefore we are going to put you in prison. So we are using then data and digital data with communities to sort of create this counter data on the institution that has created data to criminalize us for so long. So I think the idea is that we are not speaking to the access of justice, but we are actually speaking to and creating and generating evidence on a framework which has been designed to exclude us from any kind of conception of justice to begin with, and say that there is actually a need for an imagination of an alternative idea of justice which is different from this framework that has been designed to oppress us. So I think that is the way in which we see, and I think this is the kind of critical thinking and leadership around data, which is what communities have been doing, right? And as we proceed with this conversation, we will speak to it how, in cases of custodial violence or, custodial deaths, when somebody has been falsely implicated, this is the kind of critical engagement with technology that people have been pushing back against, to be able to create avenues of justice for themselves that lie outside of this formal legal framework.
Thanks so much, Nikita. That's something that I'm going to actually ask a little bit later in my second question. But I think that's also what you just mentioned about how communities have been gathering evidence and creating, using digital tools to create evidence about the abuse of digital tools, right? So that's a really powerful way to frame it. And I think My second question is exactly about that. When communities see that the technology is not working for them but against them and is being used to exclude them further. And this is a question to you, Osama, and then to you, Nikita, after that. How communities have been building resilience for many, many years when technology didn't exist or technology exists elsewhere but doesn't exist or doesn't work for them. I mean, it could be communities that have built mesh networks, or it could be communities that are sort of building very localized social entrepreneurial models. And I think you have tons of examples of people that have sort of been forced to stay outside the, say, fast internet and access to data and access to other privileges through access to digital technology. And what kind of new and innovative models they have built to make sure that they still are able to exercise their own rights. Osama.
Like you also use the sentence that is technology failing them, or is technology not reaching them or something. Actually, it's not technology. It is the administration. It is the policy. It is the decision behind that. So if for example, if my economy was running by making product where my communication system and the market system was such that I was making a product and then communicating word of mouth, or communicating with word of hoarding, or communicating with word of whatever. I mean, existing let's say pre-digital era or pre-technology era, if you're doing, or going to the market to sell the products. So my intelligence was based on the communication system which was earlier, and then suddenly what happens is that I create a new communication system and we say that now you have to follow this communication system. Now there are two things to do this. One is that you create a new communication system, you say it's an additional economic benefit, or it's an alternative economic benefit, or it's an alternative medium to do this. And then there is a system that you say that, okay, this is the new way of doing only things. You know, it's something like you say that I can go to the market and then choose my product and buy and come back. There is another one, you say that there is no other way to do except Amazon or Blinkit or something else. And going in person is actually an alternative, but not the preference. It's something like using the lift, you know, to coming to this floor. Now we have created a situation, even going one floor, we created a situation of, you know, using the technology for going one floor and not the earlier technology which was the stairs, you know.
It's not convenient.
No, so what I'm saying, it is actually not convenient.
The stairs are not.
Of course the stairs is convenient.
But the lift is not convenient.
Lift is not convenient.
But yet we choose
It's costlier also, but you call because we created this new convenience as a culture, you know, cultural shift. So, but what I'm saying, forget about that. I'm saying, you know, in most of the building when you want to walk, the security guard will not allow you to go to the stairs.
Yeah.
You know, they will tell that only lift is go, because we don't have a security system in that area to look how you are going, or you are going to install some bomb or whatever, I don't even know. I mean, it's something like, we have created a system of changing the culture to adopting a new technology, you know, and then making it mandatory and make it exclusionary if you don't do it. So there is a process. All this has nothing to do with technology. All this is cultural practice or administrative decision or something like that, right? When you enter into a building, the security guard says, please enter here. You know, he has no idea that you know, whether it is required or not required, and then suddenly one day you go, now you do the entry and also show the Aadhaar card. The third time when you go, you say, do the entry, give the Aadhaar card, and then he will say, now put the machine on in front of you, put this Aadhaar card into that machine. That will happen when you go to Google office. Oh no, when they will check you and then they will ask you to enter, because then they are taking your data in a electronic format, because it's too much of data entry from the register, right? So what I am actually trying to say is that we actually in the process of adopting a new communication system or a new technology or something, we do not blame the person who is asking rather than, and we start blaming the technology, you know, which is a very easy way not to blame the person who is actually telling you to do this, you know, and therefore again you are subjecting yourself to injustice, to the invisible, you know, and not even target that person. We are blaming Aadhaar. Who is asking us to do Aadhaar? We should go to them and say that, you know, this new system is not acceptable or something, you know. But we are all going to have Aadhaar. Even the person who is blaming Aadhaar is also having Aadhaar. So yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to say, and at a community, the reason I said this is that at a community level, we actually create a culture of adopting new things as a healer or as something that is best, as something. I mean, for example, when we do digital literacy, they themselves ask, can I open a Facebook account? You know, the first thing, I mean, they have nothing to do with Facebook. I mean, Facebook is for those who have to interact with a friend who will also be on Facebook, right? They have no friends on Facebook. Or for that matter, I am living in such an area where I have no friends. I don't even know whether my friends are there on Facebook. I want a Facebook. Yeah, because it's a new technology, new communication system which is being created in such a way that I want to be there. You know, and then you make it mandatory and all that.
And I think the two things that really are very important here. One is the power structure that is behind technology and how it percolates through technology. Existing power structures that have been there in the society for so many years, be it caste-based, be it gender-based, be it disability-based. All these power structures that already exist in our society use technology as a vehicle to move forward. And people are actually responsible. People that have enjoyed generational privileges have always used these power structures to ensure that the technology works for them and not for them. You can often, as you rightly said, a lot of these power exercises happen with the pretext of that there's a digital revolution, there's a new digital tool, and let's use this tool so that we can solve X, Y, Z problem. The second thing that I think is very important here to recognize is that technology is not a panacea or antidote to all the existing problems. Nikita, to you, my question would be, how do you see this existing resilient innovations that exist in our society, in our communities, that now are trying to address problems created by technology?
So I mean, I think I can speak to the context in which I have sort of engaged with these questions the most. I think there has been this sort of facade of, you know, safety that has been created with technology, right? One is of course what Osama was also referring to earlier, is speaking to, you know, accessibility, that अच्छा आप lift ले लेंगे. Of course, it's a different story कि आप lift लेंगे, that your domestic workers are only then mandated to take the stairs. No, they are not allowed to take lifts.
Yeah.
So it's just been sold as this thing of, you know, making lives easier, obviously for a certain strata of society, under the banner of saying, you know, access for all. But that all is obviously a very, very minuscule section of the population to make lives easier for them, right? So this whole idea of surveillance technology has come into place to say, you know, let's make ourselves and make our communities safer, which is basically to say, if you're living in a gated community, install all the CCTV cameras that you can and surveil, you know, your domestic workers, the people that come to collect garbage, basically people without whom your lives will not function, but people you must watch, you know. So we want them to do their job, but we want them to do it in a way that doesn't bother us, because ultimately we think they are a problem to us, right? Yeah. So we need to make sure our houses are clean, our neighborhoods are clean, but also making sure that you are not walking and you are towing the line, right? So that's sort of disciplining, or as they say, very, very, to the point in Delhi, apni auqat mein raho. So it is that kind of disciplining technology of keeping people who are already in a strata in their auqat, right? To maintaining that auqat structure is what this has been put into place for, right? So CCTVs, for instance, like this is obviously again a great place to be having this conversation from Cyberabad. CCTVs everywhere, right? Being sold as a public good, as a public commodity. But if you see, and this is as lawyers, we see this very, very like happening on a day-to-day basis is, when they said, oh, CCTV is a great way to be able to keep tabs on the police, right? Police station mein CCTV laga do. But very interestingly, only where, there is this one spot in the police station where this person who has been illegally detained is subjected to torture, where the CCTV never works. So when you call for the footage, वो बोलेंगे हमारा वो camera काम नहीं कर रहा था. So very, like strategically there are certain forms of technology when it is used to create accountability that fail, right? And like my colleague Sanjana is here, who's worked on a case where we were trying to get call data records of a person who had been charged for attempt to murder. He was never at that place and he had actually made a call to the police to say there is an instance of violence that has happened here. And like these calls to the police helpline, when you dial 100, that is data that is used by the police to actually identify which are areas where miscreants are living, right? So if I am calling and saying, oh, there is this X area of Cyberabad where this is happening, they will say that's a crime hotspot because a lot of people are saying instances of violence are happening there, or we're receiving calls of help from that particular area, right? So in this particular case, we tried to push the court to say, pick up that 100 call record, which will prove to you that this person was nowhere around where this instance of violence was happening, which is evidence of the fact that he was not involved in this incident, right? But we were not given those records. But this is the way in which, which is where, community level fact findings that come into place, right? Where then you go there and you speak to people that were present, or in the case of, where CCTV footage is conveniently unavailable when somebody has been tortured in custody, is where then you push to say, okay, look at the internal injuries that this person faced, or you approach commission. So that kind of documentation, when was this person arrested? You are required to be in custody for not more than 24 hours. But, there were people who saw and said, this ko 2 din pehle leke gaye the, which shows that the arrest records were fudged. And I think this is the kind of community level documentation which, people who, again, in development sector speak, we would like to call it as paralegals, are actually the ones who are creating this kind of evidence, counter evidence, and doing the job of investigation which an entire agency has been, historically on paper determined to do, right? And then that is the process that facilitates people's access to justice, right? When somebody's been subjected to violence, it's not CCTV footage which is saying that they've been subjected to violence. It is this kind of documentation by lawyers, by family members, by community members, which then allows for the court to then finally, 20 years later, take cognizance of the fact that this person was subjected to violence. So I think people's lives have always existed in opposition to the technology, because the technology has always been part of a system that has been created in opposition to people's lives. And I think it's important to see that kind of dichotomy and people's relationship with that in that light.
Thank you so much, Nikita. That's such an important way to also make sure that we are identifying the resilience within communities and also the work that the communities have been doing since thousands of years. And we've seen technology evolving. We also have seen communities building processes to ensure that when the technology fails, it doesn't work for them, then they have something to protect the members of the community. With that, I think we should take a few questions from the audience, and I don't know how much time we'll left with, maybe one question to begin with for each one.
Shall I go ahead?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Please. working with human rights defenders who have to deal with so much from the government side as well as from the side of the communities that they are working with. How do we encourage them to ask the right questions for themselves? What I have understood by the discussions that I've seen since morning is that, like Osama mentioned, we're talking about Aadhaar all the time, but we are not asking the right questions. So how do we encourage the people who are human rights defenders, who are CSOs, who are in the field, to ask the right questions for themselves and for the communities that they work?
May I?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there is two ways in which I would respond to that. One is, I think communities are defending their human rights and they've been doing so historically. So if there is somebody who's working with communities as allies, they work with them, not for them, because that is the sort of partnership that is envisioned in that framework. Also, I think people have been asking these questions, right? It's always a matter of what kind of questions are considered to be pertinent questions and acquire center stage, and then what are rendered to the margins, right? So I think the idea is, if somebody sees themselves as working with communities, representing communities in certain ways, for them to be able to then make way or create that sort of bridge for people's questions that they've been asking for a very long time, to then be platformed and for those, because those questions are being asked.
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of us, perhaps in this room, a lot of these questions are new, but it's not just questions that are being asked, because those are lives that people are living, right? So they're also engaging with those questions on a day-to-day basis. Like, predictive policing is new for us. People have always known, they have been at the receiving end of some kind of prediction that always ends with one answer. So I think there is a need to center those, right? Like, there is so much of, speaking from the margins, but there is a need to reorient the center.